Welcome, everyone. And thank you, Jenny, for doing this for us this evening. So Jeni Bate grew up in Wales and currently resides in Salton City on the west side of the Salton Sea. As a child, she loved painting skyscapes, but pursued another career path and became an avid and prolific poet. In 2001, she had an epiphany and told herself, now you have to paint. And so she did, returning to her skyscapes, using her artistic talent to encourage others to give the sky as much consideration as she does. It is, after all, and ultimately where we all live. Yet it's also and all too often taken for granted and or suffering from human-caused pollutants. She has developed a signature technique involving cutting and reassembling, which she calls refracturing. And her mantra has become, I paint skies with peace and passion because that's the way they paint me. The paintings and poetry has subsequently been combined into a number of books, all featured at her website, skyscapesforthesoul.com, and they're available at amazon.com. Her titles include Cloudier Days and The Cheeky, Busting the Bard, the incomplete Shakespearean sonnets of Jeni Bate. She shows in a multitude of galleries in the desert and elsewhere, belongs to a number of art associations, so we can't claim her all to ourselves, but she is on our board. And in her spare time, a question I'll be asking tonight is, does she actually have such a thing? She helps her husband's business raising and breeding hognose snakes. Woo! Without further ado, here is Jeni Bate.
Hello, everybody. Okay, let me share my screen and let's talk about some art rather than snakes for right now. Okay, can we see that? Oops, I did not mean to do that. So I was trying to get rid of the commands at the bottom. Okay, so the skyscapes, Nancy was saying about the sky is where we all live. And really, when you think about it, we live in the sky at ground level. We don't live in the water or in the earth. We live in the sky. So it's the most vibrant and moving and controlling part of our planet. And obviously life would not be here if it weren't for the sky. So skyscapes alone are not necessarily particularly unique, although try deciding whether or not your work is going to fit into landscapes or waterscapes when it doesn't have either of it on them. And I guess skyscapes needs to be a word, a category eventually. So that's one of my things I need to get on the bucket list. So when I started painting in 2001, I started with watercolor. I actually started studying photography in 2001 and I decided I wasn't going to be limited by photography. So I started to paint. And I started with watercolors. And as you can see here, I started quickly. I did some other things at the beginning, but then quickly moved on to skies. And about, I'm going to say 10, 12 years ago, I was given by my parents, by my mother, a slide of me painting as a small child. And the painting, I was either 3.5 or 4.5. And I know it was half because I was in front of the Christmas tree doing this painting in the picture, and my birthday's in July. But I had a little easel, and I completed a painting. And the painting I completed was a skyscape. And I saw I realized when I saw that they had all been the same way as a child. It's all sky, 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 mountains, mountains, mountains. So it was always about sky. I painted a lot of that as a child. Anyway, back to 2001, I started taking some classes, how to actually learn how to paint. And I did watercolors, and then later on I moved to acrylics and oils, but it was all about the sky. And these two are done off my back porch here in Salton City. The one on the right, I don't know if you can see the controls are there, so I can't see the bottom, but it's the Salton Sea features in a lot of my paintings done across the Salton Sea. It's one of the things that I actually have in common with, oh, his name's gone, the surrealist, Dali. He actually included a lot of his backgrounds included this landscape of the shore where he lived.
Mm-hmm.
So acrylics and oils, and where we go now? There we go. I also like painting birds. I love birds, and I got to where I am today, as I said, by 3 mistakes and a theft. So the first mistake was not painting birds as such, but I like to paint on different surfaces. So the one on the left here is on it's on a leaf from a piece of bamboo outside a restaurant in LA. And I took 6 pieces home and used them. And I can't remember where it is. And then the other one that's obviously more available to me is on palm bark. And I love this surface. It's a beautiful surface to paint on. But you can't hang the stuff. You can't put a nail or a screw in there. It splits. So that was the first mistake, was the palm bark. So I decided to get around this by cutting them down and putting them into shadow boxes. And they really didn't look very good. And I took them to some art fairs and nobody was interested in them. And the frames of the shadow boxes are really thin, so it's really hard to put a wire on them. So that was the second mistake was the shadow boxes. So I gave up with them. I threw all of the palm bark away, and then I had about a dozen shadow boxes kicking around the bottom of the studio. And I don't like to be wasteful, so I thought one of the other things I wanted to do was to use more than one skill in each painting. So I decided to do a watercolor background on the back of the box, and then reverse glass acrylic painting on the front. And this went fine for the first couple. And then, not being good with numbers, which is why I'm really glad that nobody persuaded me to be treasure. I decided I would, instead of measuring the back of the box, I just turned the skyscape painting over and put the back on there and just drew around it. So I just did one of these and I turned it over and like, there's a boo-boo one side. I got a big bloom out on one side and the other side perfect. So I just cut it off. Oh, I wish I could take that side and put it over there. Ding dong, snip, 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 rearrange, rearrange. I love it. And I think this is, there we go. That was the first one. It was very rudimentary, but I just love the effect. And after that, then I couldn't wait to finish all of the rest of the boxes in this way. And then the next stage was moving from the 3 dimensionals just to flat ones inside of just flat frames, regular frames. And then the next stage was also getting onto, oh, let me do it, I'm not following my own spiel. Different shapes. Some of these shapes have persisted and some have not. The waves top right there, that's a very popular shape. People love the movement. They love the circles. Not so much really with the ovals, but the ovals does have a story behind it. One day I was thinking I would do ovals, and what do I have in the house that's oval to draw around? Or what do I have in the studio? Nothing. What do I have in the house to draw around that's oval? Well, nothing. But let's look at the bottom of the maple syrup jar. It's kind of like an oval with ends out of it. So I drew around that and then extrapolated the ends so that my ovals are actually based on the bottom of the maple syrup jar. The octagons top left, oh boy, was that ever a difficult shape to work with. I have never worked with octagons since that is the only one. But I like experimenting with different shapes. The theft came from quilters. After about 2 years of this, I was doing an art fair in La Quinta and the quilting convention was in town. So about every 4th woman that walks in the booth is, oh, this looks just like refractored quilting. So I thought, what is this refractored quilting? So, and I had actually been looking for a word different than just collage, because it's not just collage. So they said, well, we do refractored quilting. We quilt the same quilt several times, then we cut it in pieces, and then we quilt it back together again. So I'm thinking, Well, at least I start with a whole painting, but that was the word that I stole. I needed something different than just collage, because there's a lot of differences between collage and what I do. Collage artists will get their pieces from magazines, from photographs, so they don't create their own pieces. Then they cut from the front to subtract some parts of the image, of different images, and bring them together to create a completely different image. In my case, I actually paint my materials, and I cut them largely from the back and reassemble them to create them, like a different version of itself. So if we go back to that one, you can see that all the pieces came from the same place. They all started out as a painting that looked very similar to what you see in front of you. So I needed a different word. I do have watercolor collages, though. The one on the right is a collage. I almost always have leftover pieces from the refractors. So I had a box of leftovers, and I bring them together to create those are the true collages, or watercolor collages. In some ways, I've been asked what kind of, how would you describe it as, not as a medium, but as not as a technique, but as a style. Well, they're abstract because the sky is an abstract subject. I painted them realistically. Well, I'm more impressionistic now. And then collaging them back together gives them another level of impressionism. And I once asked the lady I met who has a master's in fine art history, and I said, well, stylistically, where am I? And she says, you're somewhere between third generation orphist and unclassifiable, which is exactly where I want to be, but try explaining that to a gallerist over the phone. Actually, that kind of worked, because once I did that, she says, I have to see this. So start with a watercolor background. This one's a little bit unusual because I did like a whole painting rather than just the sky. Different techniques, wet and wet, wet and dry, a UPO technique, wiping it on, rubbing it off. I usually work on 24 by 18 or 18 by 24, depending on which way around I'm doing it. And then cut geometrically on the back. I now have a lot more shapes, but this was the first hexagons, and oh boy, geometry was such a long time ago. So there's a lot of drawing on the back and a lot of cutting. Some of them I spend days cutting out when there's so many, because I don't want to get RSI. And the trick with getting the with the framed ones to make sure you cover everything is to draw the oblong, flip the mat over, draw the oblong there where you have to fill out to. And then I'm putting them on the foam core. I usually work on foam core now. I started off working on cardboard, but that's not good. I work on foam core under mat. So I put them for the most part in the same area that they came from, and I have like some will flow. You can see one cloud flowing into the other, and some there'll be a clash in there. Sometimes I'll put a piece of the bottom near the top and vice versa to mess with your head. And as I'm laying them out, I have some I need to overlap them a little bit. So as I'm moving them around, like I'll be putting this piece down, and then that one will move, and that one will move, and that one will move. And so I'm like bringing them back down, and then this one will move over here. I'll jiggle it. So it's very fiddly. And I tell people sometimes that's usually an evening task, because it involves tweezers and a glass of wine. Once they're all laid down, then it becomes a piece of engineering. I pick them off top first, mark them on the back, draw where they were, and then have to go back and when I'm gluing them down, I'm actually going in reverse order. So you go 1 through 100 or whatever. I think the biggest one I've done is probably about 300 or 400. And then you go backwards from bottom up. that's a little bit better impression of the grid on this one. As you can see, once you've got lots of overlaps in there, they're not all perfect hexagons when you mark them out. Here we are partway through gluing it down, good old Mod Podge, a dictionary. I have multiple sets of books that I lean on, that I use as weights. As you can see, it's well used, it's all covered in glue there. There we are, it's all glued down. It still doesn't look very much. But then that one I added snowflakes onto it and then painting some foreground. And I think on that one I added a cardinal in later and I put some waves in the river. And the unusual thing about that wintry scene is I sold it in Ridgecrest, which is just as much of the desert as here. There we go, that's the finished one with the cardinal in there. Okay, here's an example of before and after. I don't often take pictures of my befores and afterwards, but this is one of them. Obviously, I took the photographs in different lighting situations. So one of the other movements was to get out of frames and onto panels. There was some impetus with this was the first art fair that I ever did. We had scouts helping us unload, and the first thing they did when they unloaded my biggest piece was they dropped it and broke the glass. So I started by the show by losing my showstopper. If you use glass, obviously that shatters easily. If you use plexi, it only takes 1 3-year-old going, "Mommy, look." And then you have to reframe it. And you leave them in my shed in my garage, and you have to reframe them every 6 months anyway, because sand gets everywhere. So I wanted to get out of frames. And I got some experimental materials from this from Errol Etienne, who was another Salton City resident. You can Google him, he's famous. And after he passed, his wife was getting rid of a lot of stuff. So I got some cradle panels. And Annie Strack, who wrote for a now defunct magazine called Professional Artist, showed us how to glue on panels and how to spray with the acrylic varnish for protection. So that's the technique. I Mod Podge or matte medium to glue them down, Krylon acrylic spray, 3 coats, and then I would also glaze them on top of that, a mix of blossom and matte medium. Either flat panel or gallery wrap style. This one on the top left, I think it's finished up in acrylic. I don't know, can't remember. But these two, you can see those are very shiny. I used to use self-leveling clear gel, which they no longer make. Here's another example of hole through the process. This is actually a storm off my front porch as opposed to the back porch. 10 paintings there. This is the one that took me 3 days to cut out. Storage jar at the bottom of them, 350 circles. And there's the work table. And the roller tables off to the right with all of the little pieces on. So I'm actually following the picture that I started with, the photograph that I started with on this one. Yeah, the top's complete. And then on this one, I did peeling off and marking, and then I did filling it in on the side bits. It was a lot easier to do it. This is a 30 by 40 wood panel. So that was a lot of extra work. And I think on that one, I actually had to stop and paint another painting because I really realized I really didn't have enough. Gluing in 2 dimensions is interesting, or 2 or 3 dimensions. Stir sticks and clamps to hold the side pieces on while the book holds the top on. Onto the easel for the foreground. Yeah, it's a close-up on the foreground. And then glazing. And that's there it is in the sofa of the White House. They call it the West Coast White House. All the furniture is white and it's painted white on the inside and outside because it's a gallery. And then poetry. I wrote poetry. I started writing poetry when I was 7. It's one of those things that we do in Wales. We write poetry and we recite poetry. So it's only natural that that should be a big influence in my childhood and throughout my life. And we studied a lot of Shakespeare, and we studied a lot of Shakespearean sonnets. And I fell in love with Shakespearean sonnets. When I moved to LA in '95, I used to read poetry on the spoken word scene there. And after I moved to the desert in 2005, there was no poetry readings. So I had to find another outlet for the poetry. So I started writing poetry for the paintings and painting it in. Yeah, this one's called Crimson Thread. And you can buy the book and read that if you want later. I'll have a look at it on the website. A word on the poetry thing. The book Busting the Bard comes from one of the bucket list items. Mine was to write more Shakespearean sonnets than Shakespeare himself, and I achieved that. I think 6 or 7 years ago. And I'm not the biggest Shakespearean sonnet writer on the planet. There's somebody who's written 1,500, 3,000, something like that. But I keep adding to the book. Every new edition has got more and more in it. Then the next step with these was to not fill the entire panel with refractor, but finish it off with acrylic afterwards. They're a little less busy. This one's Ocean's View. And that's this also makes it easier to use different shapes, because some shapes work really well with the mixed media treatment, but they really don't work well with just refractoring, just because like the octagon, they just don't fit well together. Then other things I like to do is shaped panels. Some of these I cut myself. The one on the left, the circle, I went to Home Depot to get some wood. And like, oh, look, the circles are already cut for me. Yeah. So this is, it's about 5 minutes, 5, 6 minutes.
I can't hear it.
Yeah, we can't hear it, but
Can you hear it okay?
no.
No,
Oh, hang on. Hang on a second.
I think you'll
Oops.
have to speak for it.
Hang on. Now I can't stop it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I can't stop it. There we
Just
go.
a
Let it
Sorry.
play.
Okay,
One.
watching it, we don't have to hear the words. We can just
Yeah.
watch it.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just like, why would you not hear them? Because I can hear them just fine.
Because your Zoom is using your volume, your speaker, not the what's on YouTube or wherever this
Oh,
is.
Yeah. Yeah, don't worry about it. Just play it and then you
okay.
talk over it.
Okay. Okay. So wet and wet watercolor. And also kind of thinking about poems that I might write for the painting once I get in there. I put them on paper towels and then they actually go and dry on the bed because I got a good fan in there. When it's really hot, I'll put them outside and they dry really quickly. 120 degrees, 1% humidity, dry. This is one of those hurry up and wait moments. So I have to work really fast so that it doesn't go to mush. So I'll actually read you the poems afterwards. This one that I'm doing right there is Sunset looking east over the Salton Sea. So this was afternoon. Salt plus stars on that one. That's the nighttime one. I love the way that it carried out, stopped while I went and picked the rock out. It was too big. And so in the morning, it was circles to represent the rising sun. at noon it was raindrops shapes, raindrop shapes. In the evening, it was the it was clouds for the evening clouds, and then at the night it was stars as well. So actually do a better job of doing the clouds now. I have another way. Oh, I was saying, some people ask if the work's digital. Yes, these 10. I think we filmed about 25 hours, and that's not including about 2 hours where I didn't realize the battery had run out, and then obviously not cutting the pieces, cutting the panels or prepping the panels or glazing the panels afterwards. So I try and make sure that there's something going around each edge of the surface. And even though on this setup, I've got it morning left to right, morning to night left to right, because the dawn comes up towards the right, I always do, I ended up doing it right to left. And there I have to hold them because I don't have the clamp because it's got no edge to clamp to. I think there I'm putting the painting the poetry into each one. The horizons, the Chocolate Mountains, which looks at, on the other side of the Salton Sea. And I've actually had somebody look, and it's just an approximation. And I actually had somebody come into my booth and said, "Is that the Chocolate Mountains there?" So I guess it was. I get it. Good enough. Now you can see that they really stand out from the background. And then the horizon part on the acrylic part of it as well as the last stage. It's called 4 Hours of Equinox, and it's not 4 seasons, it's 4 Hours of Equinox.
Cool.
Okay, now how do I get out of
Just go
Go back.
down to the lower right and tap onto the 4 corners pointing inward.
oh, there we go, thank you. Oops, no, that didn't work. There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let me share my slide show again. Got the control panel. Okay. Most recently, I've started working on more and more upcycle surfaces, little panels that I get from Goodwill, all kinds of boxes and things like that. I've been doing refracted oils and acrylics, which I liked working on the more lightweight surfaces because that allows me to create larger paintings that are actually light enough to ship. Wet acrylics was another experiment, and I only did a few of those. They ended up being incredibly messy to actually create the wet acrylic, but it's on raw canvas as well. That was an interesting experiment. I liked the effect, but it was just so messy. And then the Wisdom of Weather boxes. I don't know if I've got a thing on them there. No, that's okay. There's some oils and acrylics. And the one on the right-hand side was an old acrylic painting that I reworked, and I've done this with a few of them, to add a refracted part on top of it. This is another Dawn of the Salton Sea one, across the Salton Sea. Oh, there's the wet and wet acrylics.
Wow.
And then the Wisdom of Weather boxes. I have a 3-line poem, or sometimes a 4-line poem, that joins the surfaces of the box. And these are all reclaimed boxes. These are all boxes from Goodwill, refurbished. And sometimes the refurbish on the removing of the extraneous bits, like the one on the bottom there, it was a cutlery box. So it's got all of these like little slots in there. Sometimes removing all the velvet, that velvet is glued on very well. So they often take a lot longer to prep than actually make once it's cleaned up. And I think that's it. That's it. So, any questions?
Yes, thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. Really beautiful work. I wanted to ask you, Jeni, I've been wanting to ask you this ever since our tech run through today. I wanted to know, what were the skies like in Wales where you grew up, and how does that differ from the desert that you're living in now?
I think it's different because there's a lot more clouds there in Wales, because it's a much wetter environment. It's much more similar to Seattle.
Yeah.
And one of the things specifically is where I grew up. It was kind of on the side of a hill in a valley, and so we didn't really see the view from the back door where we would get the sunset view. We looked up a mountain, so we didn't really get a lot of sunsets, very good sunsets. And I was not a child to be up at dawn looking at whether there was a dawn sky, beautiful dawn sky. Here, I can actually stand on my roof and look about a couple 100 miles in every direction. So this stuff, Montana being big sky country, it's here. It's so flat that this part of the desert is so flat and open that you can almost see, you can actually see the curvature of the earth, in that at certain points of like winter solstice, it looks like the sun is coming up out of the water on the Salton Sea. And that's only about 35 miles away. So that's how far I can see. Not 35, it's, yeah, it's just very long open distance. I think I'm just more involved in the interesting things. It's like in Wales, it's like, oh, it's a cloudy day. In Salt City, it's like, oh, clouds, because we don't get so many of them.
Right.
Yeah, you get up in the morning, like, no, blue, plain blue.
Yeah.
You're in time, you get the yellow edge, and that's it. But yeah, same planet.
But did you find that coming to Southern California that you were really drawn to the sun and the sky and all of it?
In a little sense, it was the weather. There was a lot of factors moving to the U.S. I'd always felt I belonged here. You may have heard of a correspondent called Alistair Cook, and back to radio shows. Listen to radio shows when I was a small child. Alistair Cook's Letter from America was one of the things I had to be quiet for, and I did understand that. I couldn't understand what he was talking about because I was 3, 4, 5 years old, but I did understand I needed to be where he was, not where I was. And there was a lot of things politically that were going on in the UK. One of the things was, and I'm not saying this because I get arrested on a regular basis, but the right to silence was taken away. And it was just like it got to a point where everything was in place to come here. And sometimes I think it's a mistake. This political stuff going on here, you know, before the last 8 years, that I'm thinking that politically it's better over there, but then I'm here now. And I can't go back easily.
Yeah, and you wouldn't have the skies if you went back. So you'd
have what, sorry?
You wouldn't have these skies if you went back.
I wouldn't have those skies, no. I would have a lot more clouds, but I think the only place I could live back there would be out on the fens and where it's as flat as it is here.
Yeah.
I'm a flatlander at heart. That's kind of one of the things.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Karen?
Yes,
I just want to
Karen.
say your work is wonderful, and it was just mesmerizing watching your process. So such great respect for what you're doing here
Oh, thank you.
and your passion. And I look forward to going to your website and seeing your poems too. So
Thank you.
thank you
Yes.
for sharing
Sorry,
all that.
I
It's
wasn't
really-
talking very well over the video because I'm talking, you know, in my own ear, and then I'm trying to
It was lovely,
talk
honey.
and not listen to
Lovely.
myself.
No kidding. It was just lovely, though.
Well,
Thank you.
Ah,
Jenny, one thing I was curious about, because most people I know that cut things, they're very particular about the scissors. They're very particular often about the paper. And I wasn't sure if your speediness sort of belied the fact that you may have spent you too may have spent a fair amount of time making selections of those, both your instruments and your
Yeah.
materials. And I was just
The-
curious.
The material, there are two papers that I like. They're both Strathmore papers. They're not high-end papers at all. 150-pound papers. And I like them for a couple of reasons. There's a texture to the surface of the watercolor that when, and I think one of the things I didn't say, you wouldn't heard me say in the video, is that almost everything I paint is with a mixture. And this is something that I was inspired by a gal called Mary Gail King, who lives in Ventura County. And she must have mixed this, I think she mixed, it must have been ultramarine and burnt umber. And as they flowed, they separated and they made a gradient in the flow. And then they also make the one Strathmore, it looks like the edge of a cloud more than another. And I've tried the higher end papers, I've tried the expensive papers, but they just don't work the same way. And then the 300-pound, I don't want to use the 300-pound paper because 150 is quite heavy enough to be folding and cutting. The scissors, it's scissors. These are my sewing scissors from when I was 10 years old. And the only reason I'm stopping using them because I can't find anybody to sharpen them. It's just like the $1 scissors, you know, they're just paper scissors. There's no, you know, it's like Milford Zorn's was like with his brushes. I'm in the Milford Zorn's School of Brushes as well. Any brush will do. So.
Gracias.
great. Any other questions or comments? No? Well, I will just say that we loved seeing all this
Thank
work.
you.
Yes.
And it makes me want to get up and go put some wet on wet watercolor, get that going.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
just love how big you're working and how freely you're working and how it just all flows together. I do the wet on wet stuff in very small,
Oh, yeah.
but to get in, you know, to get in there and just deal with the big sheets looks like a lot of
Yes. Yeah.
have to
Well,
get.
once you've done it for 4 or 6 times, it's like, okay, yes. Yeah.
Ah.
And you get the hang of it.
Yeah, very brave of you to get in there and do that.
It-
And
is
I loved the curved pieces that you did at the very end. I mean, it's really interesting seeing how it all came together, and then at the very end,
Oh, yeah. An interesting thing, a comment about that last painting, the 4 Hours of Equinox. I follow a gallery in Phoenix, Scottsdale actually, and one of the things he investigated was AI doing talks about somebody's piece of work. And he says, try this Theobot.ai. He says, show it a piece of your artwork and see how it describes it. So I showed it the 4 Hours of Equinox. Well, it just didn't get it. It just didn't get that. Firstly, it talked about the different shapes and how maybe I should consider exploring shapes in my continued work. It did not see the horizon. It suggested at the end that I would consider putting something that would join all 4 pieces together. It didn't get that there were 4 times of the day. It did not see the poetry in there either. So it just like, and I do find when I'm talking to people about my work, I have to tell them about the poetry because it's hidden in there enough that you can't see it until you get close to it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
how do you hide it in there? I'm curious, because I didn't see it in the images that were on your
You know,
website.
let me see if I can find it on my website real quick and show it to you, the whole thing. I actually, when I have an art fair, I go to, there it is right on the front page. No, I have little signs in the booth that say "Get closer to see the poetry."
I mean, are you
Um,
doing it really small? How are you putting it into the image?
I'm just painting it in with a watercolor brush if it's in on watercolor, and I prefer to do it on watercolor because then I find acrylic very blobby.
Right.
And
So
my-
is it small letters?
yeah,
and
it's really small. It's like
Wow.
You can still share a screen if you want, or hold it
yeah,
up.
yeah. I my screen's gone really, really it's gone really slow.
You're probably, yeah.
Let me go and grab one off the wall.
Okay.
Very inventive.
Yeah, and I can't say that I've seen these pieces in person.
I haven't. I would
Light
love to.
light on this as well. So this one, I don't know how, this is the writing bit. That's how small it is.
Wow.
That's how
Good
small.
roll you
Yeah,
have.
it's really well hidden. Yeah, this one is actually more well hidden than others. But sometimes I tell people, if you love the painting and you don't care so much for the poetry, you can pretty much stand back and ignore it. And with the ones with Shakespearean sonnets in, I say, if you put this in the dining room and you're just about to serve dinner for this big fancy dinner party that you're giving to people, and then just as you're about to serve dinner, the cat knocks over the gravy all over the kitchen floor, you can just say to people, go find the Shakespearean sonnet in that painting, and you got another 20 minutes.
That's good. There are a couple comments that in the chat that
Yeah.
I'd love to read to you. One is
Um,
from Katie Bishop, says, Jenny, terrific seeing your beautiful, adventurous work. Sorry, I have to leave early. And the other is from Nancy Lawrence. It says, thank you, Jenny. Your work is so beautiful.
Thank you, everybody. I hope
It's,
that you've enjoyed the little talk.
we've never had the opportunity to see the film, to see someone in process. There's all
Yeah.
the questions about it. And in a way, the fact that you were narrating it versus talking in the film, we really could kind of capture the visual of the movement. There was
Yes.
a certain poetry, as it were, to that.
Yes.
And then you're also in your role here as our connector
Yeah.
to this work. And I feel that there's, in the work you do, you're acting somewhat as, like almost, you're connecting to,
Mhm.
you're bringing these different elements together, but respecting their individual spaces. And it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
quite wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
If you want to go on my website and look at the video so you can hear what I say, Skyscapes for the Soul. And then if you go to the little menu across the top, let me see if I can share. No, it was running so slowly. I'm not going to try that. It goes about Jenny, and then at the bottom of that page, there's some videos.
Excellent.
This is one of them. This is one of them. Yeah.
Great. All right.
Thank you.
Well, again, thank
Thank
you so much
you.
for doing this evening. It was
Yes.
lovely.
And I
Right.
will be seeing many of you on the weekend.
Right. And we're excited that next June 19th, Kathy Engel Martyr will be our guest artist.
Yes.
So the exploration, the journey continues.
Yes. Yes.